The biting wind howled through the valley, a relentless force that swept across the snow-covered landscape, creating a world of white that seemed both beautiful and treacherous. Ilara Whitfield stood at the window of her modest cabin, gazing out at the endless expanse of snow that blanketed the ground. It was early morning, and the pale light of dawn filtered through the frosted glass, casting a soft glow on the wooden interior of her home. The silence of the winter morning was punctuated only by the occasional creak of the cabin settling in the cold, a familiar sound that reminded her of her solitude. Ilara had always preferred the quiet life, away from the bustling settlements where people crowded together, often driven by greed and ambition. Out here, in the isolation of the valley, she had built a life centered around her simple needs, growing vegetables in the short summer months, hunting for game, and gathering wood for the long winters. It was a hard existence, but it was hers. Yet, as she stood there, a sense of unease began to creep into her thoughts. The winter had been harsher than usual, and the isolation felt more suffocating with each passing day. She turned away from the window, shaking off the chill that had seeped into her bones. Ilara moved to the fireplace, stoking the embers back to life, willing the warmth to fill the small space. As she worked, her mind wandered to the stories she had heard about the mountain hunters who roamed the peaks nearby. They were a rugged breed, known for their survival skills and their fierce independence. Some whispered that they were outlaws, while others spoke of their loyalty to the land and its traditions. Ilara had never encountered one herself, but she often wondered what it would be like to meet someone so different from herself. Just as she settled into her routine, a sudden commotion outside caught her attention. A loud crash echoed through the stillness, followed by a desperate cry for help. Ilara's heart raced as she rushed to the door, flinging it open against the howling wind. The cold air hit her like a slap, but she pushed through it, driven by the urgency of the call. As she stepped outside, her eyes scanned the surrounding snowdrifts, searching for the source of the distress. There, partially buried beneath a fallen tree, lay a man. His face was pale, and his breath came in shallow gasps as he struggled to free himself from the heavy branches that pinned him down. Panic surged within her, but she quickly forced herself to focus. This man needed help, and she was the only one around to provide it. As she hurried over, she could see the deep cuts on his arms and the blood staining the snow beneath him. "Hold on, I'm coming!" Ilara shouted, her voice barely audible over the wind. She knelt beside him, assessing the situation. The tree was large, but with determination, she began to push against it, trying to shift the weight off him. "What's your name?" she asked, her breath visible in the frigid air. "Graham," he gasped, his voice strained. "Graham Fletcher, please, I can't move." With a surge of adrenaline, Ilara gripped the edge of the tree, her muscles straining as she pushed with all her might. The snow beneath her was slippery, but she found her footing and gave it everything she had. Slowly, the tree shifted, and Graham let out a relieved groan as he was freed from its grasp. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was done for." Ilara helped him to sit up, quickly assessing his injuries. He was clearly in shock, but the immediate danger had passed. "You're hurt. We need to get you inside," she said, wrapping an arm around his back to help him stand. With great effort, she guided him toward her cabin, their footsteps leaving a pair of deep impressions in the pristine snow. Once inside, Ilara settled him onto a chair by the fire, her heart pounding as she hurried to gather supplies. She fetched her medical kit, her hands shaking slightly as she rummaged through the contents. "You're going to be all right," she reassured him, though she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. "Just breathe." Graham winced as she cleaned his wounds, the sting of alcohol bringing forth a grimace. "You're a good soul," he said, his voice steadier now. "Not many would have helped a stranger like me." "I couldn't just leave you out there," Ilara replied, her gaze meeting his. There was something in his eyes, an intensity that spoke of hardship and resilience. "What were you doing out here in this weather?" "I was hunting," he explained, his voice growing stronger.
but the storm came in faster than I anticipated. I thought I could make it back to my camp, but then, well, you saw what happened." As she bandaged his wounds, Ilara felt a strange connection forming between them.
Graham's rugged features and the way he spoke with quiet determination drew her in, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of warmth in her heart. Yet, a nagging worry lingered in the back of her mind. She had heard tales of mountain hunters, how they sometimes brought trouble with them, trouble that could extend to anyone who dared to help them. After tending to his injuries, Ilara offered him some broth she had prepared earlier, watching as he sipped it gratefully. "You need to regain your strength," she said, her tone gentle but firm. "You'll be stuck here for a while until the storm passes." Graham nodded, his expression serious. "I appreciate your hospitality, Ilara, but I can't stay here long. There are those who might come looking for me." "What do you mean?" she asked, her brows furrowing in concern. He hesitated, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "I'm not just a hunter. I'm involved in things that are bigger than myself. There are people who want me for what I know. If they find out I'm here..." Ilara's heart sank at the implication. She had invited danger into her home, and the thought of it sent chills down her spine. What kind of trouble are we talking about? "Conflict between settlers and the tribes in the mountains," he said, his voice low. "I've seen things, heard things. There are those who think I hold valuable information. If they come here..." He trailed off, leaving the threat unspoken but clear. Ilara felt a knot form in her stomach. She had acted out of kindness, but now that very kindness could put her life at risk. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "For now, we wait," Graham replied, his gaze steady. "But you need to be cautious. If anyone comes looking for me, you need to be ready to protect yourself." The fire crackled in the hearth, the only sound breaking the heavy silence that settled between them. Ilara's mind raced with possibilities, her instinct to help clashing with the stark reality of the situation. She had opened her door to a stranger, and now that decision weighed heavily on her conscience. As the hours passed, the storm outside raged on, snow piling up against the cabin walls. Ilara could feel the atmosphere shifting, a tension building in the air, as if the very world was holding its breath. She glanced out the window, the swirling snow obscuring her view of the valley, but the unease remained. Something had changed, and she couldn't shake the feeling that her act of kindness had set off a chain of events she could not control. That night, as they settled in for what they hoped would be a peaceful rest, Ilara lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Graham's presence was a comfort, yet the weight of uncertainty loomed over her. She couldn't help but wonder what the morning would bring. Would they be safe, or would the consequences of her decision come crashing down upon them like the snow that buried the valley outside? In the darkness, she resolved to remain vigilant. If trouble was coming, she would be ready to face it head-on. Little did she know, the dawn would bring with it a storm far more dangerous than the one raging outside. As the wind howled and the snow continued to fall, Ilara closed her eyes, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead, unaware that her life was about to change forever. The first light of dawn crept into the cabin, casting a pale glow on the walls and illuminating the shadows that danced in the corners. Ilara stirred awake, her body still heavy with the fatigue of the previous day, but a sense of foreboding hung in the air, sharper than the cold that seeped through the walls. She glanced over at Graham, who lay asleep on the makeshift bed she had prepared for him, his brow furrowed in a troubled dream. The events of the night before rushed back to her, his desperate plea for help, the weight of his words about the dangers lurking outside. As she rose from her bed, the cabin creaked in protest, and she felt the chill of the morning seep into her bones. Ilara moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer out. Her heart sank at the sight before her. The valley, usually so peaceful and still, was now filled with the silhouettes of riders, at least 260 of them, their horses lined up like a dark wave against the stark white of the snow. The riders were a mix of men, their faces hardened by the cold and the weight of their purpose. Some were clad in the rough leathers of mountain folk, while others wore the more polished attire of local militia. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as she quickly stepped back from the window, her mind racing. She had acted with kindness, but that kindness had drawn a storm of trouble to her doorstep. What had she done? The realization hit her hard, like a slap across the face. Graham's presence was no longer a comfort. It was a beacon for danger.
"Graham," she whispered, shaking him gently, "wake up." He stirred, his eyes fluttering open, and for a moment he looked disoriented. But as he registered her urgency, his expression shifted to one of alarm. "What's wrong?" he asked, propping himself up on one elbow. "Look outside," she urged, her voice barely above a whisper. Graham swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, wincing slightly as he shifted his weight. He moved to the window, and when he saw the riders, his face paled. "This is bad," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "I told you they would come looking for me." Ilara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What do we do? They'll come for you." Graham turned to her, his eyes serious. "We need to stay calm. They're not attacking yet, they're assessing the situation. But it won't be long before they decide to come in." "What are they looking for?" Ilara asked, her voice trembling. "Information," he replied. "They think I know something about the conflict between the settlers and the tribes. They want to know where I stand." Ilara's mind raced. She had taken a man into her home who was now a target, and in doing so, she had put herself in danger. "You can't let them take you," she said, her voice firm. Graham nodded, his expression resolute. "I won't, but we need to figure out a plan. I can't stay here, not now." The wind howled outside, the sound rising and falling like a living thing. Ilara felt the weight of the snow-laden sky pressing down on her, as if the world outside was closing in. "What if we try to escape?" He shook his head. "It's too risky. They'll see us the moment we step outside. We need to wait for the right moment." Ilara's heart raced as she considered their options. The cabin felt like a cage, the walls closing in around them. What if they decide to storm the cabin? Graham's gaze hardened. "Then we'll have to fight. I won't let them take me without a struggle." The gravity of his words settled heavily in the air, and Ilara knew that they were on the brink of something dangerous. She moved to the small table where she had set out some food the night before, her hands shaking as she prepared a meager breakfast. The warmth of the fire was a comfort, but it did little to quell the anxiety that coursed through her veins. As they ate in silence, the tension outside grew palpable. The riders moved about, some dismounting to converse in low tones, their faces stern and watchful. Ilara couldn't shake the feeling that they were being judged, scrutinized by those who held power over their fate. "What if they come in?" she asked, glancing at Graham, who was lost in thought. "They might," he replied, his voice steady. "But if they do, we need to be ready to stand our ground. You need to show them that you're not afraid." Ilara nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She had always been independent, but this was different. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. "And what if they ask about you?" "Then you tell them the truth," Graham said, his gaze piercing. "You tell them I'm just a man seeking shelter from the storm, nothing more." The words hung in the air, a fragile thread connecting them. Ilara understood the weight of that statement. It was a gamble, one that could either protect them or lead to their downfall. As the morning wore on, the riders began to move closer to the cabin, their horses snorting in the cold air. Ilara's heart raced as she caught sight of a man approaching the door, his silhouette dark against the snow. "Get ready," Graham whispered, his voice low and urgent. Ilara felt her pulse quicken, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The door creaked open, and in walked a tall man with a rugged face, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Morning," he said, his tone casual but laced with authority. "I'm Barrett Cole. We're looking for a mountain hunter."
Heard he might be hiding out here. Ilara's heart dropped, and she exchanged a quick glance with Graham, who remained tense beside her. I don't know what you're talking about, she replied, forcing her voice to remain steady. Barrett's gaze narrowed, and he stepped further into the cabin, surveying the space. We've got reports of a man in these parts, and it's no secret that he's caused quite the stir. You wouldn't want to be caught harboring a fugitive, would you? Ilara felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. He's just a man seeking shelter from the storm, she said, her voice trembling slightly. He's not a criminal. Barrett chuckled dryly, his demeanor unfazed. Is that so? And what do you think would happen if we found out you were lying? Graham stepped forward, his expression fierce. You don't have to threaten her. I'm here, and I'll face whatever comes. Barrett's eyes flicked to Graham, and for a moment, a flicker of surprise crossed his features. So you're the one we're looking for. You've certainly stirred the pot, haven't you? Ilara's heart raced as she watched the exchange, feeling the tension crackle in the air. What do you want with him? She demanded, stepping protectively in front of Graham. Barrett raised an eyebrow, an amused smirk playing on his lips. What do I want? Information. You see, there are people who think you know something that could tip the scales in this little conflict of ours. I don't know anything, Graham said, his voice steady but filled with an underlying tension. Barrett took a step closer, his gaze intense. You might want to reconsider your position then. We're not here to play games. Ilara felt the walls closing in, her mind racing for a way out of this situation. You can't just barge in here and threaten us, she said, her voice rising. We've done nothing wrong. Barrett's demeanor shifted, and he leaned closer, his voice low and menacing. You're harboring a man who's involved in something much bigger than you realize. You're in over your head, little lady. The tension in the room was palpable, and Ilara felt a surge of defiance rise within her. I won't betray him, she declared, her voice firm. Barrett's expression hardened, and he straightened up, a cold smile crossing his lips. That's a bold choice. But understand this, if you choose to protect him, you're making an enemy of us. Graham stepped forward, his eyes fierce. I won't let you intimidate her. You want me? You'll have to come through her first. Barrett's gaze flickered between them, and for a moment, Ilara thought she saw a hint of respect in his eyes. Very well, but know this, we will be watching you. You may think you're safe here, but you're not. With that, Barrett turned and strode out of the cabin, leaving Ilara and Graham standing in stunned silence. Ilara's heart raced as she processed what had just happened. The threat was real, and they were now in a precarious position. What do we do now? She asked, her voice shaking. Graham's expression was grim. We prepare. They'll be back, and we need to be ready. Ilara nodded, determination flooding her veins. She had chosen to stand by Graham, and now she needed to see that choice through, no matter the cost. As the wind howled outside, she felt a sense of resolve settle within her. They would face this storm together. Days passed, and the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly strained. The riders remained vigilant, their presence a constant reminder of the danger that loomed over them. Ilara attempted to maintain a semblance of normalcy, but the weight of their situation pressed heavily on her shoulders. She and Graham shared quiet conversations, during which he revealed more about the cultural tensions in the region and the struggles faced by both settlers and indigenous peoples. Ilara found herself torn between her growing sense of loyalty to Graham and the fear of the militia outside. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Graham spoke of the conflict that had driven him to the mountains. It's not just about survival anymore, he said, his voice low. It's about understanding. There are people out there who think they can take everything without consequence. Ilara listened intently, her heart aching for the struggles he described. But what can we do? She asked, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on them. We can start by standing together, Graham replied, his gaze steady. You've already shown courage by helping me. That's a start. The days turned into a blur of tension and uncertainty, each moment dragging on as they awaited the next move from the riders. Ilara remained vigilant, her instincts honed by the constant threat outside. Then, one afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, a group of riders approached the cabin, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. Ilara's heart raced as she recognized Barrett among them, his expression unreadable as he dismounted. "Looks like we're back for round 2, Graham said, his voice taut with tension. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever was to come. She had made her choice, and now she had to see it through, even if it meant facing the storm head-on. The days dragged on, each one blending into the next as the oppressive presence of the riders loomed over Ilara and Graham. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the valley in a thick layer of white, muffling sounds and creating an eerie silence that felt almost suffocating. Ilara found herself constantly glancing out of the window, her heart racing each time she spotted the dark figures of the riders moving in the distance. They patrolled the area with a relentless vigilance, their faces stern and unyielding, as if they were waiting for any sign of weakness from her or Graham. Inside the cabin, Ilara and Graham tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. They spent their days tending to the fire, preparing simple meals, and sharing stories to pass the time. Graham, still recovering from his injuries, had taken on a more active role in their survival, helping Ilara gather supplies and fortify the cabin. Despite the circumstances, their bond deepened, forged in the shared struggles of their precarious situation. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Graham spoke of the conflict that had driven him to the mountains. "It's not just about survival anymore," he said, his voice low and serious. "It's about understanding. There are people out there who think they can take everything without consequence." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Ilara listened intently, her heart aching for the struggles he described. "But what can we do?" she asked, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on them. The fear of the militia outside was a constant reminder of their vulnerability. "We can start by standing together," Graham replied, his gaze steady and resolute. "You've already shown courage by helping me. That's a start." Ilara nodded, feeling a flicker of hope ignite within her. She had never considered herself particularly brave, but the choices she had made in the past few days had forced her to confront her own strength. "I won't let them take you," she said, her voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect you." As the days turned into a blur of tension and uncertainty, Ilara remained vigilant, her instincts honed by the constant threat outside. She knew that the riders were watching her closely, assessing her every move. The atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly strained, each moment dragging on as they awaited the next move from the riders. Then, one afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, a group of riders approached the cabin, their silhouettes stark against the fading light. Ilara's heart raced as she recognized Barrett among them, his expression unreadable as he dismounted. The sight of him sent a chill down her spine, a reminder of the ultimatum he had given her days earlier. "Looks like we're back for round 2, Graham said, his voice taut with tension. He shifted slightly, readying himself for whatever confrontation lay ahead. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself for the encounter. She had made her choice, and now she had to see it through, even if it meant facing the storm head-on. She opened the door, the cold air rushing in, and stepped outside to confront Barrett and his men. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. Barrett regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "We've come to talk," he replied, his tone condescending. "We know you're harboring a fugitive. It's only a matter of time before we find him." Graham stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "I'm not going anywhere," he declared, his voice firm. "You can't intimidate us into submission." Barrett's gaze shifted between Ilara and Graham, assessing the situation. "You think you're brave, don't you?" he said, a mocking smile creeping onto his lips. "But bravery doesn't change the fact that you're in over your head. We're not just going to walk away." Elara felt a surge of anger at Barrett's words. "You don't understand what you're doing," she shot back, her voice rising. "This isn't just about you and your men. There are lives at stake here, innocent lives." Barrett's expression hardened. "Innocent? You think he's innocent? He's a mountain hunter, a man who's chosen to live outside the law. You're protecting a criminal." Graham's eyes narrowed. "I'm not a criminal. I'm just trying to survive. The real criminals are the ones who take without giving, who destroy lives without a second thought." The tension in the air thickened, and Elara felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She could sense the riders' impatience, their fingers twitching near their weapons. "What do you want from us?" she asked, her voice softer now, trying to find common ground. Barrett stepped closer, his tone dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Help us find him, and we'll leave you alone. You'll be safe. But if you choose to protect him, you'll be putting yourself in danger. You'll become a target." Elara's heart raced as she processed his words. The choice before her was stark and unforgiving. "I can't betray him," she said firmly, her resolve hardening. "He's saved my life, and I won't turn my back on him now." Barrett's eyes narrowed, his patience wearing thin. "Then you're making a grave mistake. We'll be back, and next time it won't be just a conversation." With that, he turned and signaled to his men, who mounted their horses, leaving Elara and Graham standing alone in the fading light. As the riders disappeared into the distance, Elara felt a mix of relief and dread wash over her. She had stood her ground, but at what cost? The threat was far from over, and she knew that the riders would not give up easily.
Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken fears. Graham turned to her, his expression a mix of admiration and concern. "You are brave," he said softly, "but they won't take this lightly." Elara nodded, her heart pounding. "I know, but I can't let fear dictate my choices. I won't betray you, Graham." Days passed, and the tension in the air grew thicker. Every sound outside sent Elara's heart racing. Every shadow felt like a harbinger of doom. The rider's presence was a constant reminder of the danger they faced, and Elara found herself struggling to maintain her composure. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Graham spoke again about the cultural tensions in the region. "There's a history here that runs deep," he said, his voice thoughtful. "The settlers and the mountain folk, they've been at odds for generations. It's not just about land, it's about identity." Elara listened intently, realizing how little she truly understood about the struggles faced by those around her. "What can we do?" she asked, feeling the weight of the world pressing down on them. "We can start by understanding each other," Graham replied, his gaze steady. "It's easy to see the other side as the enemy, but we're all just trying to survive in our own way." As the days turned into a blur of tension and uncertainty, Elara found herself reflecting on Graham's words. The riders were not just faceless threats, they were people with their own fears and motivations. She had chosen to stand by Graham, but she also understood that the situation was far more complicated than it appeared. Then, one fateful morning, the atmosphere shifted. Elara awoke to a chilling silence, the usual sounds of the valley replaced by an unsettling quiet. She glanced out the window, her heart sinking at the sight before her. The riders had returned, but this time they were not alone. A larger group had gathered, their numbers swelling to nearly 300. The sight of them sent a wave of panic through her. "Graham," she called, her voice urgent. He rushed to her side, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "This isn't good," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "They've brought reinforcements." Elara's mind raced as she considered their options. "We can't stay here," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to leave." Graham shook his head. If we run, they'll chase us down. We have to stand our ground, but we need a plan.
As they prepared for the confrontation, Alara felt a surge of determination. She had made her choice, and now she had to see it through, no matter the cost. Together, they gathered supplies and fortified the cabin, readying themselves for whatever lay ahead. The sound of horses approached, and Alara's heart raced as she braced herself for the impending confrontation. The riders dismounted, their expressions grim as they approached the cabin. Barrett stepped forward, his gaze locking onto Alara with a predatory intensity. "Last chance," he called out, his voice echoing across the snow-covered landscape. "You can either turn him over to us, or you can face the consequences." Alara took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for. She stepped outside, her chin held high as she faced Barrett and his men. "I won't betray him," she declared, her voice steady. "I stand by my choice." Barrett's expression darkened, and the tension in the air crackled like electricity. "You're making a mistake," he warned, his tone low and threatening. "You think you can protect him, but you're only putting yourself in danger." Alara felt the weight of his words, but she refused to back down. "I'd rather face danger than betray someone who has shown me kindness. I won't be a part of this." The riders shifted restlessly, their eyes flicking between Barrett and Alara. Graham stood beside her, his presence a steadying force as they faced the impending storm together. Barrett's gaze narrowed, and for a moment it seemed as if he might reconsider. But then his expression hardened. "Very well," he said, his voice cold. "If you won't cooperate, we'll take matters into our own hands." With a sudden motion, he signaled to his men, and Alara felt her heart drop. The riders moved forward, their intentions clear. In that moment, everything she had fought for hung in the balance, and she knew that the outcome of this confrontation would shape not only her fate, but the fate of everyone in the valley. As the riders advanced, Alara's resolve solidified. She had chosen her side, and now she would stand firm in her decision, no matter the cost. As the riders advanced, the air around Alara crackled with tension. She stood firm, heart racing, her breath visible in the frigid air. Graham remained at her side, a silent promise of solidarity in the face of impending danger. Barrett Cole, the leader of the riders, stepped forward, his expression a mask of cold determination. "Do you really think you can protect him?" Barrett sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You're just a woman in a cabin, playing at heroics. You don't know what you're up against." Alara's resolve only strengthened at his words. "I know more than you think," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear simmering beneath the surface. "I know that kindness is stronger than cruelty, and I won't allow you to harm him." Barrett's eyes narrowed, and he gestured to his men. "Then you've made your choice. We will take him by force if necessary." With that, the riders surged forward, their intentions clear. Alara felt a surge of adrenaline, her instincts kicking in as she prepared for the confrontation. She had made her choice, and now she had to stand by it, no matter the cost. "Graham, we need to get inside," Alara shouted, pulling him back toward the cabin. They retreated into the shelter, barricading the door with whatever they could find: furniture, tools, anything to slow the inevitable onslaught. The sound of pounding hooves and shouts from outside echoed in her ears, a chaotic symphony of fear and determination. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere was thick with anxiety. Alara could hear the riders dismounting, their boots crunching in the snow as they surrounded her home. Graham moved to her side, his expression a mix of gratitude and concern. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice low. "You can still turn me in. It might save you." "No," Alara replied, her gaze fierce. "I won't betray you. I'd rather face whatever comes than turn my back on someone who has shown me kindness." Graham nodded, understanding the weight of her words. Together, they prepared for the worst, knowing that the confrontation would test not only their courage, but also their resolve. Outside, Barrett's voice rang out, commanding and authoritative. "Ilara, you can't hide forever. We know he's in there. Hand him over, and we'll leave you in peace." Ilara clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "I won't give him up," she shouted back, her voice echoing in the stillness of the valley. "You'll have to come and take him." The riders exchanged glances, some visibly impressed by her defiance, while others remained resolute in their mission. Barrett's jaw tightened, and he stepped closer to the cabin, his tone shifting to one of persuasion.
"You don't understand the danger you're putting yourself in. This isn't just about him. It's about your safety, your home. Think about what you're risking." Ilara felt the weight of his words, but her conviction remained unshaken. "I won't be intimidated. You're the ones who threaten peace in this valley, not us." A murmur rippled through the riders, and Ilara caught a glimpse of doubt in some of their eyes. Perhaps they hadn't expected her to stand so boldly against them. It was a small victory, but it fueled her determination. Barrett's expression darkened, and he turned to his men. "Then we'll do this the hard way," he declared, his voice cold and unforgiving. "Prepare to breach the door." Alara's heart raced as she and Graham braced themselves for the impact. They knew they had to hold their ground, but the reality of the situation weighed heavily on them. The sound of wood splintering echoed through the cabin as the riders began to force their way inside. "Get ready," Graham whispered, positioning himself beside Ilara. "We'll fight if we have to." Ilara nodded, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had made her choice, and now she had to stand firm against whatever came next. The door buckled under the pressure, and she could feel the cabin tremble as the riders pressed in. With a final, powerful shove, the door burst open, and the riders flooded inside. Chaos erupted as Ilara and Graham fought to defend their home. Ilara grabbed a heavy iron skillet from the table, wielding it like a weapon as she faced the intruders. Barrett stepped forward, his expression a mix of anger and surprise. "You think you can fight us?" he shouted, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I won't let you take him," Ilara shouted back, her voice fierce and unwavering. She swung the skillet at the nearest rider, catching him off guard and sending him stumbling backward. Graham joined the fray, using his strength to push back against the riders. Together, they fought with everything they had, refusing to back down. Ilara felt a surge of empowerment as she stood beside Graham, their bond forged in the heat of battle. But the odds were against them. The riders were numerous, and their determination to capture Graham was palpable. Alara's heart raced as she realized they couldn't hold out forever. They needed a plan, a way to escape the chaos that surrounded them. "Graham, we have to get to the back," Ilara shouted, trying to make herself heard above the din of the struggle. "We can't fight them all." He nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. They fought their way through the throng of bodies, pushing toward the back of the cabin where a small window offered a potential escape route. Ilara could hear Barrett's voice rising above the chaos, barking orders to his men. "Don't let them escape! Surround the cabin!" The urgency in his voice spurred Ilara and Graham onward. They reached the back of the cabin, and Ilara quickly pushed open the window, glancing back at the chaos behind them. "We have to go now," she urged, her heart pounding. Graham climbed through first, followed closely by Ilara. They landed in the snow outside, the cold biting at their skin, but there was no time to waste. They had to put distance between themselves and the cabin before the riders regrouped. "Where do we go?" Graham asked, scanning the surrounding landscape for any sign of safety. "There's a thicket of trees to the east," Ilara replied, pointing toward the dense forest. "We can hide there until we figure out our next move." They took off, running through the snow, their breath coming in quick bursts. Ilara felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. They were escaping, but the danger was far from over. As they reached the thicket, they ducked behind a cluster of trees, their hearts racing as they listened for the sounds of pursuit. The riders were still inside the cabin, but it wouldn't be long before they realized their quarry had escaped.
Graham leaned against a tree, catching his breath. "We need to find a way to turn this around," he said, his eyes scanning the area. "We can't just run forever." Ilara nodded, her mind racing. "What if we try to rally the mountain folk? They might not trust us, but they'll understand the threat the riders pose." Graham considered her suggestion, his brow furrowing. "It's a risk. They might see us as enemies, especially after everything that's happened. But we can't let Barrett and his men continue to terrorize the valley," Ilara insisted, her determination shining through. "We need to unite the settlers and the mountain folk against them. It's the only way to ensure our safety." Graham's gaze softened as he looked at her. "You're right. We have to try." They spent the next few hours hiding in the thicket, waiting for the chaos at the cabin to subside.
The crowd murmured, the tension palpable as they weighed her words. Ilara could feel the weight of their judgment, but she refused to falter. She had made her choice, and she would stand by it. After a long moment, the leader nodded slowly. "Very well, we will hear you out, but know this: trust is earned, not given freely." Ilara felt a surge of hope as the crowd began to gather closer, their expressions shifting from suspicion to curiosity. Together, they could forge a new alliance, one that would stand against the encroaching darkness. As she spoke, sharing the details of the riders' plans and the threats they posed, Ilara felt a sense of belonging wash over her. She was no longer alone in her fight. She had found her place among the mountain folk. In the days that followed, Ilara and Graham worked tirelessly to unite the settlers and the mountain folk. They shared stories, built trust, and forged a bond that transcended their differences. Together, they trained and prepared for the inevitable confrontation with Barrett and his riders. When the day of reckoning finally arrived, Ilara stood at the forefront of the united front, her heart pounding with anticipation. The sun rose over the valley, casting a warm glow on the faces of those who had gathered to stand against the threat. As the riders approached, Ilara felt a sense of calm wash over her. She had chosen her side, and now she would fight for the values she believed in: honor, kindness, and the strength of unity. The battle that ensued was fierce, but it was fueled by the determination of those who fought for a better future. Ilara felt the weight of her choices, but she knew she had made the right one. Together, they stood against the tide of violence, refusing to be swept away. In the aftermath of the confrontation, Ilara found herself surrounded by those she had fought alongside. The mountain folk and settlers stood together, their bonds solidified by the trials they had faced. They had created a new community, one built on trust and understanding. As she looked around at the faces of her newfound friends, Ilara felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. She had chosen to stand by her principles, and in doing so, she had forged a path toward a brighter future. In that moment, Ilara realized the true power of kindness. It had the ability to bridge divides, to heal wounds, and to create a sense of unity in a world often torn apart by conflict.
She had found her place in the valley, and she would continue to fight for the values she held dear. As the sun set over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the valley, Ilara felt a sense of peace settle within her. She had faced her fears, made difficult choices, and emerged stronger on the other side. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but it had also been filled with hope and the promise of a better tomorrow. Reflecting on her journey, Ilara understood that even the smallest act of kindness could have far-reaching consequences. It had led her to a new community, a new purpose, and a newfound sense of belonging. And as she stood among her friends, she knew that together they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment on what you would have done in their place, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss the next tale from the frontier.